Hello, and welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Tonight, we are taking a slow walk back into a world where the air is sharp, the walls are stone, and the job of keeping watch in the dark might just cost you your fingers if you're careless. I'd like you to find a comfortable place, settle into your bed, and let the weight of your blankets press down. Dim the lights if you haven't already. Let your eyes grow heavy and just listen. You are standing at the base of a medieval castle tower. The stones under your boots are icy, the kind of cold that seeps straight into the bones. Torchlight flickers far above you, casting long, nervous shadows. The wind whistles through gaps in the battlements, a high, thin sound that never seems to stop. You're here to take your turn on the watch. But in a time before central heating, even the most lavish castle was a drafty, hollow shell compared to what you know today. Guards on duty lived with the knowledge that a long, cold night could be just as lethal as an enemy arrow. So, how did they do it? How did they manage to snatch even a moment of sleep? How did they keep warm enough that exhaustion or the cold itself didn't simply overtake them? Let your mind drift and imagine yourself trudging up those spiral steps, each one colder than the last, until you reach the guard post high above the courtyard. The sentry you are replacing rubs his arms briskly, his teeth chattering. He warns you, keep moving or the cold will eat you alive. And that is no exaggeration. Castles, you see, were designed with defense, not comfort in mind. Those thick stone walls, so brilliant at stopping a catapult stone, were terrible at holding heat. In summer, they insulated against the sun, but in winter, they trapped the icy dampness, bleeding a profound chill into every single room. Modern engineers, measuring temperatures in preserved keeps, have found that even with a roaring fire in the main hearth, the upper chambers rarely rose above what you might consider a brisk spring morning. For the guards, tucked into high towers, it was far, far colder. And yet, sleep was not a luxury. It was a necessity. And so, they found ways. One of the first and simplest tricks was a borrowed warmth. Here's a quirky tidbit from the annals of history. Guards sometimes tucked hot stones wrapped in scraps of cloth into their bedding. This was the medieval version of a hot water bottle. Imagine the process. Down in the kitchens, hours after the main fires were banked, a soldier would place several smooth, fist-sized stones near the glowing embers. He would wait, perhaps turning them with a stick until they were almost too hot to touch. Then he would quickly wrap them in a piece of spare linen or wool, careful to avoid a burn, and carry them upstairs. The trick, of course, only lasted an hour or two at best. The heat was fleeting, but it gave just enough warmth, a concentrated spot of comfort against the belly or between the feet, for a soldier to drift off before his body adjusted. You can imagine clutching one under layers of rough wool, the stone's solid heat fading slowly, so slowly, as your dreams began. It was a small, temporary victory against the vast, cold stone of the fortress. But where did they sleep? Surely not at their posts. Historians still argue about this. They debate whether night watchmen truly slept inside their posts, or if strict captains demanded that they remain standing, pacing to stay alert. The written orders, the official garrison rules, often strictly forbade dozing. The punishment could be severe. And yet, human fatigue always finds a way. Numerous accounts and simple common sense describe men found curled in corners, their cloaks pulled up over their heads. When exhaustion became too heavy to bear, guards developed countless quiet strategies to survive the bitter air. Close your eyes now and picture a narrow guard room at the top of a tower. It's barely a room, more of a stone alcove. Two men huddle on a straw mattress pushed against the wall. Their boots are still on. Their cloaks are wrapped tight. The mattress itself is thin, the straw flattened after weeks of use. But it serves one crucial purpose. It lifts them just enough off the stone floor to keep the stone from losing all their warmth.
Above them, a tiny slit in the wall, an arrow slit, admits a faint draft, enough to whistle softly, like a distant, mournful flute. One man pulls his hood low over his face. The other murmurs a prayer against frostbite. Their breaths mingle, forming little clouds that drift and vanish in the half-darkness. The sensation of cold here is not dramatic. It's not the kind that freezes you instantly. It is relentless. It is a slow, creeping numbness. Your fingers stiffen. Your toes ache. Every gust through the cracks feels like the touch of an invisible thief stealing your body heat. You shift under your cloak, searching for a position where the chill doesn't gnaw at your bones. Your companion rolls closer, and you allow it without complaint. Warmth is warmth. Pride be damned. The rhythm of the castle itself helps you rest. Bells mark the hours. The soft clank of chains as a drawbridge is checked. The occasional muffled bark of a dog from the courtyard far below. Each sound reassures you that life continues outside your small, cold cocoon. You tuck your hands into your armpits, breathe against the wool of your cloak, and count heartbeats. And for a little while, you forget the cold. Some guards, of course, had it worse. Imagine those stationed at the top of exposed walls on the open battlements where no fire could possibly be lit without alerting an enemy. For these men, sleep wasn't an option. Survival was. There, men might stamp their feet constantly, a dull, rhythmic thud, thud, thud on the stone walkway, just to feel their toes. They would swing their arms in great circles, windmill style, to keep the blood flowing. These poor souls often slept only in brief, desperate snatches when they were finally relieved. Sometimes they would just collapse onto the bare planks of the tower room, too tired to even seek out a mattress. The lucky ones rotated quickly. An hour or two awake in the freezing wind, then a chance to go below, to warm up near a brazier in the tower room. But unlucky watchmen lingered longer, and stories abound, tales told by other guards in hushed voices of men found stiff, frozen mid-watch. Whether all of these tales are true, or if they were embellished to keep new recruits alert, they remind us just how thin the margin was. The line between life and death on a medieval night was as sharp as a shard of ice. In such a place, every single detail mattered. It mattered how you layered your tunic and your woolen shirt. It mattered whether your boots were stuffed with dry straw, a simple but effective insulation.
It mattered if you remembered to pull the bedding all the way up to your chin. Forget one step and you might wake with frost on your eyebrows. Or you might wake with a deep, rattling cough that never quite left your lungs. Even now, archaeologists studying castle remains sometimes find soot traces in the most unexpected corners. High in towers, in small alcoves where official rules said no fire should ever be. That soot is quiet testimony. It is the evidence of desperate men who chose the risk of fire over the certainty of freezing. As you imagine yourself settling in, the stone pressing its cold up through the thin straw beneath you, think about how fragile that comfort was. There was no feather mattress, no glass window, no thermostat waiting for your touch. There was just layers of wool, a fading hot stone, and the closeness of another guard breathing beside you. You pull your cloak tighter. You listen to the sigh of the wind through the arrow slits, and you drift slowly, reluctantly, into an uneasy sleep. You wake in that half-dreamy state where you're not quite sure if the cold is inside your bones or only brushing along your skin. The guard captain has already come and gone, leaving behind only the echo of his boots on the stone steps. What lingers now is the draft. Every medieval castle, no matter how noble, had it. You can imagine a grand hall full of banners, the kind you see in films. But the truth is that the walls were not sealed like modern brickwork. They breathed. They leaked. And for a guard trying to sleep, those drafty cracks were not just inconvenient, they were relentless. Castles were built for defense above all else. Their thick stone walls, often 2 or 3 meters across at the base, were designed to resist catapults, not winter winds. You might think those thick stones acted as insulation, but they behaved more like a sponge. They soaked up the cold and slowly, relentlessly radiated it inward. On damp nights, the moisture would cling to the masonry so that a wall almost seemed to sweat. It would chill anyone who so much as leaned against it. And here is a quirky tidbit. Some guards jammed moss or even scraps of wool into the gaps between the stones to block the drafts. It wasn't elegant. It certainly wasn't in any building manual. But those improvised patches of green and gray turned the icy gusts into tolerable whispers. Imagine crouching down, your fingers numb, with a lump of sheep's wool in your hand. You stuff it into a crack like a squirrel hiding a nut, hoping it might save your toes from another freezing night. Historians continue to debate whether the draftiness was worse in the high towers or the cavernous great halls. Some argue the halls, with their high ceilings, lost heat far more quickly. Others insist the towers, exposed on all sides to the wind, were harsher. In truth, both could be brutal. You can almost hear the whistle of air through a murder hole, or the hiss through an unshuttered arrow slit. As you lie on your bedding, the rushes beneath you shift with each breeze. They carry the smell of damp straw and the faint sour aroma of last week's spilled ale. It's not an unpleasant smell exactly, but it's earthy. It reminds you that comfort here is fragile. You tuck your cloak closer and pull your hood lower over your ears. Yet the draft still finds you. It snakes along your neck. It teases at your ankles. And it makes you shiver in spite of yourself. Practical men found ways to cheat the draft. Hanging heavy cloth along the walls, even in humble guard rooms, could create a small buffer zone. Thick tapestries, woven with scenes of hunts or battles, served the nobility. But for soldiers, it might be just a rough woolen blanket nailed at the corners. The difference between bare stone and a layer of fabric was enormous. The cloth captured heat from breath and bodies, softening the air just a little. Without it, the draft licked along every seam. And you realize as you lie there that it is not the strength of the cold that wears you down. It is its persistence. It never stops. A gust at midnight, another at 2. By dawn, it feels as though the chill has been dripping into you for hours, drop by drop, like a leaking roof soaking through your cloak. Close your eyes and imagine that rhythm. Gust, sigh, shiver, shift, over and over. You doze, you wake, you turn, and you drift again. The draft keeps you from plunging into deep sleep, but it also becomes part of the castle's voice, reminding you that you are never, ever entirely sheltered. The castle itself seems to whisper in your ear, as if saying, "You may guard me, but I decide how warm you stay." There's another thought that slips in as you lie there. Perhaps not every guard dreaded the draft equally. Some men, hardened by years of outdoor labor before they ever joined a garrison, might have found the stone room no worse than a night in a field. Others, perhaps men raised in warmer lands, stationed far from home, may have cursed the northern winds more bitterly than any sword wound. Historians still puzzle over these personal differences. The records speak of punishments for sleeping on watch, but they rarely tell us how a man actually felt about the cold gnawing at him each and every night. So you tuck yourself tighter. You imagine stuffing moss into a crack, and you pull the cloak over your face until only your nose peeks out for air. The stone sighs. The draft continues. And your body finally yields to exhaustion. Sleep comes, shallow but steady, carrying you further into the long night, where even your dreams carry the echo of whistling wind through drafty cracks. You stir awake, rubbing your arms as if the motion alone could summon heat. You reach for the layers that keep you from shivering yourself into misery. In a place without central heating, your best defense is what you wear and how you arrange it. A well-documented reality is that medieval people were masters of layering. A guard might begin with a simple linen shirt. Then he would add a woolen tunic, and on top of that, perhaps another cloak thrown over his shoulders. Each piece on its own was modest, but stacked together, they created a patchwork shield against the night. There is something rather unexpected in the way clothing doubled as bedding. Soldiers often slept without removing much of their outerwear at all. Boots stayed on, hoods stayed pulled tight, belts were loosened only slightly. In fact, some men carried their spare garments not in chests, but draped around them while they slept. Imagine nodding off in your full kit. Every layer is stiff with sweat and smoke from the watchfire, yet you are still grateful, because each stitch holds in another precious breath of warmth. Scholars remain divided about just how effective those layers were. Some argue that coarse medieval wool, thicker and oilier than the refined cloth you might picture, was nearly waterproof and excellent at trapping heat. Others point out that dampness ruined it quickly, leaving guards with sodden, heavy tunics that chilled them even further. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. A man who kept his gear dry slept tolerably, while one caught in a rainstorm on the battlements suffered all night long. Close your eyes now and feel the scratch of homespun wool against your skin. It's not soft like modern sweaters. It's coarse, with fibers that itch at the neck. You tug at the collar, wishing for comfort, but you know that scratch is the price of warmth. Over it hangs another layer, heavier, carrying the faint smell of sheep, of lanolin, still embedded in the fibers. You burrow down, pulling the cloak overhead, and the scratch turns into a cocoon. The sensory world of such clothing was layered not just in fabric, but in experience. The linen carried the smell of lye from harsh washing. The wool smelled of lanolin and smoke from the last watchfire. Leather straps creaked faintly as you shifted. To a tired guard, these smells and sounds became as familiar as lullabies. They were small reminders of protection against the cold. It is easy to think of clothing as fashion, but here it is survival. One more detail. Not all guards had equal access to these layers. Wealthier soldiers, or those in the personal retinues of nobles, might be issued lined cloaks, perhaps even trimmed with fur. Poorer men made do with what they owned. Sometimes this meant patching rags together to mimic a tunic. Imagine two men sharing a watch. One is in a fine, heavy cloak, the wool thick and tight. The other is in a threadbare shirt. Picture how differently they felt the bite of the night air. Even so, the principle of layering worked for both. Add one piece, trap a little more warmth. Remove one, and you invited the night in. So you tuck your hands into your sleeves, pull the hood down to shadow your face, and curl under your layered armor of cloth. The wind whispers outside, but for a moment you are safe, wrapped in the slow, steady warmth that only many layers can build. You stir again, this time pressing your face against something softer than wool, a pelt, heavy and faintly musky. When linen and wool were not enough, animal skins stepped in as nature's perfect insulation. From fox to bear, from sheep to deer, hides were pulled into guard rooms and draped over bodies like a knight's last defense. Chronicles consistently mention that fur cloaks were prized by soldiers who could get them, not only for warmth, but also for the status they signaled. A thick wolf pelt thrown across your shoulders did more than keep you alive. It told others that you were not just any watchman, but one with means or luck. There's something rather curious about how far men went to secure such comfort. Accounts survive of guards stripping hides from recently hunted game and throwing them, bloody and stiff, directly onto their bedding for insulation. Imagine lying under a half-cured deerskin. The smell is pungent, the texture rough, yet you know it means you will wake up alive. Not elegant, not fragrant, but practical in the most desperate way. Debate lingers among modern historians about whether fur was common among ordinary garrisons or largely reserved for nobles and their household guards. Some argue that pelts were abundant in colder regions, making them available to nearly everyone. Others maintain that common soldiers had little chance of owning fine furs, relying instead on scraps of hide or second-hand pieces patched together.
As you close your eyes, picture yourself burrowing under a sheepskin. The wool side faces inward, scratchy but warm, while the leather side stiffens against the damp air. You inhale, catching a faint lanolin tang, mixed with smoke from last night's hearth. The weight of it presses down pleasantly, a reminder that nature itself is wrapping you like a blanket. The sensory impression is powerful. Your fingers trace the uneven surface of a tanned hide, rough patches alternating with softer tufts. The pelt smells of earth, of animal life, of survival. The boundary between luxury and necessity blurred. Fur was both wealth and warmth, dignity and defense. Not every soldier had access to a pelt, of course. The less fortunate curled beneath nothing more than straw and wool, envying the man beside him with a fox fur blanket. Yet the principle remained. Animal skins gave life when stone walls threatened to steal it away. So you pull the pelt tighter around you, letting its weight anchor you, muffling the moans of the wind outside. For a few blessed hours, you sink into a deeper slumber, trusting that the warmth of an animal long gone will carry you through until dawn's pale light creeps over the battlements. You shift again, this time against something crinkly and uneven. It rustles under your weight and releases a smell so earthy you could almost be lying in a barn. That's because you are resting on one of the most common sleeping arrangements for guards in medieval castles. Rushes, straw, or hay spread across a wooden frame, or, more often, spread directly on the cold flagstones. Chroniclers consistently described that garrisons slept on makeshift pallets stuffed with whatever dry vegetation was available. They were changed only occasionally and left to flatten under weeks of weary bodies. It's worth pausing on what these rustic beds were actually like. A wooden bedstead was a luxury. Many guards knew only a crude sack stuffed with straw, sometimes called a paillasse. The sack itself might be stitched from rough linen or canvas, and once filled, it was tied shut and laid on the floor. At first, the straw crunched softly, providing a bit of spring and a little insulation from the stones beneath. But with each night, it compacted, until eventually you were lying on a lumpy mat that felt more like a pile of sticks. In poorer garrisons, the same bedding lingered for months, becoming musty, alive with insects, and hardly restful at all. Something rather curious appears in a few records, though. Guards sometimes mixed dried herbs into their bedding. Lavender, mint, or wormwood was scattered among the straw, partly to mask the musty smell and partly to ward off pests. Imagine crawling into your straw sack, tired to the bone, and being greeted by the faint, common scent of lavender. A small comfort in a world defined by cold stone and creaking wood. Whether it worked or not against lice, the fragrance was a kind of psychological blanket, soothing enough to let sleep come. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself lying on such bedding. The straw crackles faintly as you shift, each stem poking into your side or scratching the skin beneath your tunic. The smell is rich, a mixture of earth, dried grass, and faint animal musk.
There is no feather bed softness, no even surface, only lumps that press into you, reshaped again and again as your tired body seeks a comfortable hollow. Yet, despite the discomfort, warmth seeps slowly upward. The straw, thin as it seems, lifts you off the stone, preventing the chill of the floor from draining all your heat. It is imperfect, but it is survival. It is easy to forget that this straw bedding carried symbolic weight as well. In the medieval imagination, straw was associated with humility and hardship. Jesus was said to have been born among it. Peasants lived their whole lives upon it, and soldiers, resting on it, embodied a kind of sacrifice. To lie on straw was to be reminded of your station. You were not noble, not royal, but one of the countless men keeping watch, half forgotten in the footnotes of history. One peculiar note comes from a French chronicle. It describes guards tossing their straw out the window after a long siege, believing that the bedding had absorbed the bad spirits of hunger and fear. Was it superstition, or just a very practical way to rid themselves of fleas? Perhaps it was both. Superstition often mingled with practicality. As you drift on your own lumpy mattress, the uneven comfort shapes your dreams. Sometimes you imagine yourself on a meadow under the stars, the straw crackling beneath like summer grass. Other times you feel the weight of the stone walls pressing in, and the straw seems no more than a fragile shield against the cold earth. Yet always it is what stands between you and freezing. Think about that as you curl tighter. Every stalk matters. Every handful piled beneath you is one more barrier against the hungry chill of stone. You close your eyes, listen to the rustle, and let the uneven rhythm of the straw lull you back into the uneasy but essential sleep of a medieval guard. You roll over, and this time what saves you from shivering isn't straw, nor wool, nor fur. It's the warmth of another body close by. For all the layers and bedding in the world, sometimes the only true shield against the medieval chill was another human being. Chronicles often remind us that soldiers rarely slept alone, especially in guard rooms. Whether in twos or in larger groups, men huddled together out of necessity, letting their body heat mingle under shared cloaks or blankets. It might feel awkward by modern standards, but in the heart of a frozen tower, pride had little place. One well-documented reality is that communal sleeping was standard across medieval society, not just among guards. Families in peasant huts piled into the same bed, children tucked between parents to maximize warmth. In inns, strangers often slept side by side. Guards simply followed the same pattern. You can picture 2 or 3 soldiers wrapped in one large blanket, shoulders touching, legs tangled, breathing the same frosty air, but finding comfort in each other's presence. An odd little custom worth noting is the bundling cloak. Instead of each man having his own, 2 guards would wrap themselves together in one oversized cloak, binding it tight with a belt so that neither could roll away. Imagine trying to sleep that way, face pressed against another's shoulder, sharing breath, hearing every snore, but also knowing the shared heat meant survival. If you drifted a little closer in the night, no one complained. Better cramped than frozen. Picture the scene. A small guard chamber. Its only light is the red glow of a dying brazier.
4 men lie side by side on straw mats, their cloaks overlapping. One mutters in his sleep, another coughs. Their shoulders touch, their knees bump. The air smells of sweat, leather, and damp wool. But in the press of bodies, there is comfort. Outside, the wind howls through the arrow slits, but inside, you feel a small bubble of warmth where breath and body mingle. The sensation of shared warmth is unlike anything else. You feel it first at the points of contact, where a comrade's arm brushes yours, where his knee presses lightly against your side. Slowly, the heat radiates, filling the space between you, softening the icy air. The sound of his breathing becomes a lullaby, steady and reassuring. You close your eyes, and for the first time tonight, you almost forget the stone walls around you. There's also the matter of safety. Sleeping together didn't just keep men warm, it kept them alert. If one stirred restlessly, others noticed. If someone grew dangerously cold, his companions could shake him awake, preventing frostbite, or worse. In this way, shared warmth doubled as a system of mutual protection. You were never entirely alone in the night watch. Some descriptions even hint at guards sleeping with their dogs pressed against them, the animals tucked under blankets like comrades. A dog's body heat was considerable, and its growl at the slightest disturbance made it an ideal bedfellow. Between men and animals, the practice of bundling together created a living, breathing furnace in the draftiest tower. Not every soldier welcomed it, of course. Imagine being crammed between 2 heavy snorers after a long day of drilling. The straw beneath you rustles. The cloaks above you shift, and you can't roll away without losing precious warmth. It is claustrophobic, uncomfortable, and at times undignified. Yet most accepted it, because the alternative, solitude in the cold, was far worse. The psychology of such closeness mattered too. In a time when camaraderie was the backbone of survival, sleeping shoulder to shoulder built trust. You depended on each other, not just with swords in daylight, but with shared body heat at night. Bonds were forged in that proximity, in the quiet hours when men breathed the same air and endured the same discomforts. And so you close your eyes again, letting the weight of another's arm brush against yours, feeling his warmth seeping through the cloaks. The cold hasn't vanished, but it has retreated to the corners of the room, pushed back by the shared furnace of human bodies. You drift, half listening to the snores and murmurs, knowing that in this small cocoon of comradeship you will not freeze tonight. In the long history of guard rooms, this simple act of bundling together saved countless lives, even if few chroniclers cared enough to write it down. So you tuck your cloak tighter around both of you, surrender to the rhythm of shared breathing, and let sleep claim you once more. The warmth of comrades fades as the watch bell sounds again, and you shift toward another form of comfort, the glowing heart of a portable fire. In the darkest guard chambers of a medieval castle, where stone pressed in like an icy tomb, the humble brazier or coal pan stood as a stubborn spark against the cold. We know from castle inventories that such portable heat sources were not rare. Braziers of iron or bronze, filled with glowing coals, could be carried up winding stairs to the guard rooms, where men gathered around them like moths to a candle. Something rather unexpected in the record is that these braziers were sometimes nothing more than a bucket of sand with hot coals poured on top.
A soldier could drag it into his corner, set his boots near it, and pray the embers glowed long enough to thaw his frozen toes. Yet this convenience carried immense peril. A coal pan could smolder too long, filling a closed chamber with choking smoke. Or worse, it could catch the straw bedding on fire. Imagine drifting into uneasy sleep and waking to sparks snapping in the straw beside you, terror mixing with cold in a single heartbeat. The scholarly consensus is far from settled on how widely such braziers were allowed in towers. Some historians argue that captains banned them, fearing fire more than frost. Others insist that portable heat was essential in northern climates, with strict rules about tending the flames safely. Archaeological traces, scorch marks on tower floors, bits of ash lodged in cracks, suggest that rules or no rules, soldiers often risked the glow.
Picture the scene. The guard chamber is dark, save for the faint red light in the brazier's belly. Shadows crawl along the walls, thrown by the trembling coals. 4 men cluster around it, hands stretched forward, their breath catching white in the air. The brazier pops softly as a coal shifts, releasing a small whiff of smoke. The warmth is small, barely enough to chase the edge off the chill, but in this place, it feels like summer itself. You crouch closer, extending numb fingers until they sting with returning blood. The iron brazier radiates a harsh, metallic heat that prickles your skin. You shift your boots nearer, the leather steaming faintly where damp met fire. The chamber smells of smoke and iron, layered over the ever-present damp stone. Yet the fire was always double-edged. Men spoke of companions who succumbed not to frost, but to smoke inhalation, especially when chambers were shut tight against the wind. Too little draft, and the brazier suffocated everyone in their sleep. Too much, and the coals burned out too quickly. The balance was delicate, a gamble taken each night. Still, imagine how that glow must have felt in the bleak midwinter. A brazier not only gave heat, it gave light. In an age where darkness pressed in with an almost physical weight, the sight of red coals glowing in the corner offered a psychological anchor. Guards could doze with their eyes half open, reassured by the steady pulse of the fire. Without it, the blackness of a stone tower was absolute, a void that chilled both body and mind. There is camaraderie here, too. Around the fire, men tell stories, sing softly, or grumble about their rations. The brazier becomes a hearth, a point of fellowship. Laughter rises, muffled but warm, as if the flames themselves coaxed out human voices. And yet, the danger never disappears. You think of the rushes spread on the floor, dry as tinder. A stray spark, one careless boot, and the fire would devour the chamber faster than the cold ever could. It is a fragile balance, fire against frost, life against hazard. As your eyes grow heavy, you lie back on your straw pallet, the brazier still glowing in the corner. The shadows sway against the walls, breathing with the embers. The warmth reaches you in faint waves, just enough to soften the stone beneath your body. You know it will fade before morning, but for now, lulled by the glow and the soft hiss of coals, you surrender to sleep. You open your eyes to find that the brazier has burned low, little more than gray ash glowing faintly in the iron pan.
The chill creeps back into the chamber. This time, though, your thoughts turn toward the fixed hearths carved into the stone itself, those recessed fireplaces built into the castle walls. Medieval builders knew the cold was a constant enemy, so they attempted, however imperfectly, to fight it with permanent fire. Surviving records show that great halls almost always had vast hearths, sometimes big enough to roast an ox. Smaller chambers, including some guard rooms, had narrow wall niches where smoke curled up through chimneys. A firmly established fact is that these hearths changed the way men experienced winter. Instead of huddling around a small, dangerous brazier, guards could bask in the wider heat of a real fireplace, where flames leapt high and cast light across the chamber. The hearth also doubled as a cook spot, its embers roasting meat or heating spiced wine. For a century returning from a shift on the battlements, the sight of a glowing hearth meant more than warmth. It meant food, light, and the promise of comfort. But there's something rather unexpected when you picture how these hearths actually performed. Unlike modern fireplaces, many medieval versions had no real chimneys. Instead, smoke drifted upward through a hole in the roof or out a small vent. That meant guard rooms could quickly fill with haze, leaving men blinking, coughing, their eyes watering, even as their hands thawed. Imagine settling down to sleep near the fire, comforted by the heat, but waking with your throat raw and your lungs heavy from smoke. It was the trade-off of survival, warmth at the cost of breath. Picture the sensory detail of one such chamber. A small fireplace is carved into the wall, glowing red as logs crackle and spit. Sparks leap upward, chasing shadows across the vaulted ceiling. The air smells of pine resin and wood smoke mingled with damp stone. Cloaks hang near the fire to dry, dripping faintly onto the hearthstones, hissing when drops touch the embers. You lie near the hearth yourself, eyes half closed. The fire's glow flickers behind your lids, an orange dance that lulls you. The warmth is uneven, your face is hot, your feet are still icy, but the contrast itself makes you drowsy. The fireplace was more than practical, though. It was symbolic. Fire represented civilization against chaos, order against the dark. In a castle tower, the hearth reminded guards that they were not merely freezing animals, but men bound together in service. Around that glow, songs might be sung softly, prayers whispered, dice thrown onto the hearthstones. The fireplace transformed the chill prison of stone into something just faintly resembling home. The fire in the wall niche fades once more, and the stone chamber grows colder with every breath. Your thoughts wander toward another method men use to trap warmth, not through flames, but through fabric. You look around and you notice cloth hangings, patched and heavy, draped from the beams and stretched across corners. These makeshift curtains are more than decoration. They are barriers against the drafts that slip in through every slit, crack, and doorway. Medieval sources often described how both nobles and soldiers hung cloth around their sleeping areas. In a grand hall, these became rich tapestries of silk or wool. In a guard room, they were more likely to be coarse blankets nailed at the corners. Yet the purpose was the same: to create a pocket of warmer air inside the endless chill of stone. One well-attested practice was the use of bed curtains. Even in humble settings, beds were sometimes enclosed with thick hangings that reached to the floor. These trapped the heat of bodies and breath, creating a microclimate within. Imagine 4 soldiers sharing a corner bedstead, their cloaks pulled tight, the bed curtains closed around them. Outside, frost coats the walls, but inside the little tent, the air grows noticeably warmer, though thick with the smell of sweat and wool. There's something rather unusual that records hint at. Men occasionally strung cloaks or spare garments across ropes to mimic curtains when none were provided. A guard could hammer 2 nails into the wall, knot a rope between them, and drape whatever cloth he had. It wasn't elegant, but it broke the draft. You can picture such ingenuity. Boots drying near the hearth, cloaks stretched out overhead, and men curling beneath the makeshift canopy, as if inside a tent pitched within the tower. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself inside such an enclosure. The curtain droops overhead, faintly damp, smelling of smoke and grease from months of use. But as you breathe beneath it, you notice the difference. Your own exhaled warmth lingers, no longer stolen by drafts. The air feels thicker, heavier, but safer. Outside, you hear the hiss of wind through the arrow slits. Inside, only the muffled sound reaches you, soft as a lullaby. The sensory world here is intimate. Your hand brushes the fabric, rough beneath your fingertips. The curtain sways gently as another guard shifts beside you, stirring the enclosed air. You listen to his breathing, steady and close, and feel a small comfort that both of you are hidden together from the night. The curtain is no fortress, but it is a cocoon. So you settle into your straw, the curtain swaying faintly above you. You tug it lower, shutting out the draft that rattles against the tower's arrow slit. The chamber darkens into a pocket of warmth, shared with your comrades. The stone still presses its cold into the room, but you, wrapped in wool and hidden beneath a curtain, have managed to outwit it, if only until dawn. The curtain sways in the draft, and your mind drifts to another remedy, one that warms from the inside rather than the outside. Guards in medieval castles, much like peasants in villages, believed deeply in the power of drink to chase away the chill. Tankards of ale, mugs of mead, or, on fortunate nights, mulled wine infused with spices became their inner hearth. Contemporary accounts remind us that fermented drink was safer than water and more available than milk. But in the icy depths of a guard's night, the most important thing was simple. Alcohol promised warmth. A widely recognized truth is that beer and ale were staples of the medieval diet. Even low-ranking sentries received daily rations, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. The liquid calories gave energy, and the mild alcohol dulled aches and eased the sting of cold. You can picture a guard finishing his watch, gulping down a cup of thick, cloudy ale, then curling up on his straw pallet, warmth blooming in his chest as if he'd swallowed a small fire. Something rather unexpected surfaces in a few chronicles. Guards sometimes heated their drinks. Hot ale or warmed mead thickened with honey was believed to help men sleep soundly in cold chambers. Spices like cinnamon or cloves, expensive imports, were rare, But when available, they transformed the drink into both medicine and indulgence. Imagine cupping a steaming mug, the sweet, spicy aroma rising into your nose while frost creeps along the walls behind you. It is comfort in liquid form. Yet, debate lingers in academic circles over how effective this practice truly was. Modern science tells us that alcohol causes blood to rush to the skin, giving a sensation of heat but actually cooling the body's core faster. Did medieval guards unwittingly worsen their risk of hypothermia? Or did the sheer caloric load of the beer and mead, dense with malt and honey, counteract the danger? Picture the sensory experience. You raise the wooden cup to your lips, its rim rough and slightly splintered. The ale inside is thick, almost chewy, with a yeasty tang. It is not crisp like modern beer, but earthy, heavy, and faintly sour. You gulp it down, wiping froth from your beard, and already you feel the illusion of warmth spreading through your chest. The social effect mattered just as much. Around the brazier, guards shared drinks, lifting cups in weary toasts. A jug of ale circulated, laughter rising, complaints softening. For a few moments, comradeship replaced misery. Still, drink was double-edged. Too much ale dulled the senses, and records contain more than one tale of a drunken guard sleeping through an alarm. Punishments were harsh because one man's stupor could endanger an entire fortress. Imagine the chamber now. A brazier glows in the corner. Curtains sway against drafts. Straw crackles beneath you. But in your hands rests a wooden mug, half full of warm mead. The sweetness lingers on your tongue. Your cheeks glow with a false heat. And for the first time tonight, you smile. The fire may fade, but inside your chest, a small warmth remains. The sweetness of mead still lingers faintly on your tongue as your stomach rumbles, reminding you that warmth doesn't only come from cloaks, fires, or drink. It also comes from food, thick, heavy meals that fill the belly and stoke the body's furnace through the long night. In the medieval world, soldiers knew instinctively what modern science confirms. Eat heartily, and your body fights the cold more effectively. Chroniclers frequently note that guards were supplied with bread, cheese, salted meats, and sometimes porridge, rations designed to provide energy rather than luxury. One well-documented detail is that guards on winter watch often ate before sleep, specifically to ward off the chill. A slice of dark rye bread, thick with coarse grains, paired with a lump of salty pork fat might not sound inviting to you now. But to a weary century, those calories meant survival. The fat was fuel, burning slowly within, creating a steady warmth that no cloak could provide. A soldier who went to bed hungry was a soldier who woke colder, weaker, and more likely to stumble on his next shift. Something oddly charming emerges from scattered records. Guards sometimes saved scraps of food, not for themselves, but to tuck into their bedding as a midnight snack. Imagine rolling over in the drafty chamber, fishing in your pouch for a piece of hard cheese, and chewing slowly in the dark while your comrades snore. The act was less about hunger than reassurance, a reminder that the world still held comfort, even in the stone's bitter chill. Picture the sensory details of one such night. A kettle hangs over the hearth, bubbling with barley porridge, stirred with a wooden spoon. The air smells of grain, earthy and warm, laced with a sharper tang of onions thrown in for flavor. A guard ladles a steaming bowl, sits cross-legged on the straw and gulps it down, the heat radiating from his chest outward. Another gnaws on a strip of salted beef, leathery but rich, savoring the salt that clings to his lips. The crackle of the hearth mixes with the crunch of crusty bread, and for a while the chamber feels less like a prison of stone and more like a kitchen. It is not only the calories, but the ritual that matters. Eating before sleep reassures you that you are cared for, that supplies remain, that hunger will not join cold as a companion tonight. Now, close your eyes and place yourself in that guard chamber after supper. The brazier still glows, the curtains sway gently, and the smell of barley porridge clings to the air. Your belly is full, pleasantly heavy, and warmth radiates from within. You lie back on the straw, cloak wrapped tightly, listening to the slow breaths of comrades equally sated. For a time, the cold feels distant, pushed back by the furnace of your own digestion. The sensory impression lingers as you drift towards sleep. The taste of salt still tingles on your lips. The smell of onion hovers in your beard. Your body is heavy with food, your mind soft with fatigue. The stone may still press its cold into the chamber, but your belly answers with fire. Your belly is full and heavy. You drift into a haze, but the toll of the watch bell cuts through your drowsiness like a blade. The night is divided. It is not one long stretch of rest, but a series of rotations, short, punctuated intervals of wakefulness and uneasy sleep. This system of shifts, so central to guard life, shaped how men endured the cold. Evidence from castle regulations and military ordinances makes it clear. Few guards were expected to stand in the freezing dark from dusk until dawn without relief. One firmly established detail from garrison rolls is that castles often divided the night into 3 or 4 watches. In winter, those watches grew shorter, not out of kindness, but out of necessity. A soldier forced to stand still in the cold for more than 2 hours risked stiff joints, numb fingers, and dulled senses. A sentry who froze became a liability, no better than a sleeping man. So the rotation itself was a weapon against the cold, an acknowledgement that human endurance had its limits. And there's an unexpected curiosity. Some castles used bells or horns to signal the changing of the watch, not only to wake the next group, but also to reassure the entire garrison that order was being kept. Imagine lying half asleep in your straw bed, hearing the faint bray of a horn from the battlements, and knowing another man has taken your place. That sound is comfort itself, a promise that for the next stretch of hours you may close your eyes without guilt. Picture the scene inside the guard chamber. 2 men rise reluctantly, tugging cloaks over their shoulders and stamping their feet to chase away sleep. Their comrades groan, curl tighter under their blankets, and relish the reprieve. The fresh watch trudge toward the stairwell, their boots clanging softly against the stone, their breath already frosting in the cold air. Those left behind shuffle closer to the brazier, lay their heads on folded arms, and let exhaustion claim them. The sensory impression of these rotations is unique. You are never entirely asleep, never entirely awake. The toll of bells, the scrape of boots, the mutter of voices, They intrude constantly. Your rest is fractured, shallow, but frequent enough to keep you alive. Each time you lie down, you know it will not be for long. You curl tighter, breathing against your hands, chasing warmth in snatched fragments of sleep. This rhythm defines your night. It is not comfort, not true rest, but a compromise between vigilance and survival. You sleep in fragments. You dream in fragments. You live in fragments. And yet, those fragments add up to enough. Enough to keep you alive. Enough to keep the castle safe. Enough to carry you through another frozen night on the wall. The horn fades into silence, and your mind begins to wander toward the architecture of the castle itself, toward the odd, hidden places where guards sometimes sought extra warmth. One of the cleverest, though rarely admitted aloud, was to sleep above the stables. Horses, oxen, and even pigs generated heat in staggering amounts. Their collective body warmth rose through the floors, seeping into the chambers perched just above. Records from household accounts and castle surveys confirm that garrison rooms were sometimes deliberately positioned above or beside animal stalls, not only for convenience, but also for the subtle, blessed benefit of that living heat. A well-attested fact is that medieval builders understood the usefulness of animal warmth. In monasteries, too, novices sometimes slept in chambers over the byres, where the animals below gave off a steady fugue of heat through the cracks in the floorboards. Guards were no different. A sentry who trudged down from a freezing wall into a freezing wall felt, by comparison, as though he had stepped into a bathhouse. It was still cold, yes, but no longer deathly so. Something rather peculiar emerges when you imagine it: the mingling of scents. The warm air rising from the stable carried with it the smell of hay, dung, and animal musk. To you now, it may sound unpleasant, but to a weary guard, it was reassurance. That smell meant warmth. It meant life, pulsing just beneath the floorboards. You could drift to sleep with the muffled snorts of horses below, hooves shifting softly in their straw, the rhythmic crunch of hay being chewed in the dark. It was less a chamber and more a living ecosystem, where man and beast shared breath and heat. Imagine the sensory scene. You lie on your straw mattress, but beneath the boards you hear the horses shifting, the soft rustle of their tails. The occasional snort breaks the silence. The air in your chamber is warmer than in the tower above, carrying the faint sweetness of hay mixed with the acid of manure. Your nose wrinkles at first, but then relaxes. The smell is part of the rhythm of life here. Your body loosens in the warmer air, your breath no longer steaming quite so fiercely in the dark. Now picture yourself in such a chamber. You curl under your cloak, the warmth rising gently from beneath. The straw beneath you feels softer, less brittle, warmed by the fugue of the animals. Your ears catch the rhythmic breathing of the horses, steady and soothing. You close your eyes, inhaling hay and musk. Outside, the wind still lashes against the stone, but here you are cocooned in a pocket of warmth, created not by fire, but by the steady life of the beasts below. The castle itself feels less hostile, more alive. You drift slowly into sleep, lulled not by silence, but by the living heartbeat of the animals that keep your chamber just warm enough to hold death at bay. The warmth of the stables fades as the bell tolls again, and you tug your cloak tighter, thinking of the small defenses every guard carried on his body. If cloaks and furs were the broad shields against the cold, then socks, hoods, and mittens were the daggers, small but vital weapons in the endless battle with frost. Surviving inventories from castles mention these garments repeatedly. Woolen hose issued to soldiers, linen coifs tied beneath helmets, mittens of leather or knitted wool. They may sound like trivial details, but in truth, they made the difference between sleep and a night of shivering misery. One established reality is that wool socks, though simple, were among the most valued items in a guard's kit. Unlike modern woven socks, they were often stitched from pieces of cloth, or fashioned as long hose that reached up the leg, sometimes all the way to the thigh, secured with garters. Soldiers prized them so much that repairs were constant. Patches of cloth stitched over holes, darning done with coarse thread. Anything to prevent the icy bite of stone floors from reaching the skin. There's something unexpectedly charming in the records. Mittens were sometimes made with a single compartment for 4 fingers and one for the thumb, just like the mittens you might remember from childhood. They trapped warmth more effectively than gloves with separate fingers. Men joked that mittens made them clumsy, but they also let them curl their hands inside for extra heat. Some even slipped bits of fur inside for added insulation. Picture the sensory experience of these small comforts. You peel off your boots after a freezing watch and flex your toes inside woolen socks, damp but still clinging with warmth. The wool scratches slightly, lanolin still lingering from the sheep, but you smile at the relief. You tug your hood lower over your face, a woolen coif lined with rough linen. You feel your breath warm the fabric until it grows humid against your skin. These garments shaped how you slept. Men often wore their socks, hoods, and mittens to bed, knowing that removing them meant waking up numb. A hood pulled over the face acted as a mask, holding in breath. Mittens tucked under armpits kept fingers from stiffening. One curious tidbit from German sources describes guards stuffing their socks with rabbit fur or dry moss for added warmth. It was an improvised insulation, softer than plain wool and surprisingly effective. Now, imagine the chamber again. Men curl on their straw pallets, cloaks pulled high. But what keeps them truly alive are the little things. Toes snug in hose, hands cupped in mittens, faces hidden in hoods. The room is a sea of sleeping forms, only noses poking out into the cold air. From the doorway, they might look like mere bundles of cloth, indistinguishable. But each bundle is a man, cocooned in small garments that mean the difference between life and frostbite. You close your eyes, sigh into the fabric, and let the scratch of wool and the faint smell of lanolin become your lullaby. The warmth of wool still clings faintly to your skin, but another comfort curls closer in the dark, padding softly across the straw. You feel a brush of fur against your hand, hear the quiet huff of breath, and realize you are not alone. A dog, shaggy, faithful, and just as cold as you, has settled beside you. In the medieval castle, animals were not only guards of the walls, but also companions in the guard room. The watchdog was a sentinel by day, and at night a furry blanket pressed against the ribs of tired men. A well-recorded reality is that dogs were common fixtures in castles, valued for their sharp senses. Chroniclers describe mastiffs chained at gates and hounds roaming courtyards. These animals were essential to defense, often alerting guards to intruders long before human ears caught a sound. Yet the same animals, once off duty, became part of the nightly struggle against cold. A dog curled at your side was warmth and alarm combined, guardian and bedfellow in one. There's something rather delightful in the details. Some accounts note that dogs chose their favorite guards and would refuse to sleep anywhere else. Imagine a tired soldier returning from patrol only to find his hound already sprawled across his pallet, tail thumping, eyes expectant. The man would grumble, shove over, and make room. The warmth that followed erased any annoyance. It is a picture as human as any. Gruff warriors soothed by the loyalty of their animals. Picture the sensory moment. The dog presses against you, its body radiating a steady heat, its fur coarse beneath your fingers. Its breath is warm on your wrist, carrying the faint smell of meat scraps from supper. You shift, and it shifts too, pressing closer, its tail thudding softly against the straw. Around the chamber, other dogs nestle against other men, a patchwork of warmth scattered among the pallets. The room smells of fur and smoke, of leather and hay. The companionship mattered as much as the heat. A guard who shared his bed with a dog slept more soundly, not only for warmth, but for safety. If footsteps echoed in the corridor, the animal stirred first, growling low, ears pricked. A man could bury his face in his cloak, knowing his canine companion would not let him be surprised in slumber. Of course, sharing sleep with animals had its drawbacks. Fleas, ticks, and the occasional stench of wet fur were constant irritants. Yet, even with these inconveniences, most accepted the trade. Better a few fleas than a frozen night alone. Now, imagine yourself fully in that moment. You lie on your pallet, cloak pulled high, straw rustling beneath. At your side, the dog breathes steadily, its chest rising and falling in rhythm with yours. Its warmth seeps into you, slow and sure. Outside, the wind moans, but inside, the dog shifts, sighs, and settles heavier against your ribs. You scratch behind its ear, feel the soft twitch of muscle, and smile in the dark. You close your eyes, lulled by the dual comfort of warmth and vigilance. The steady warmth of the dog curled at your side fades as the night wears on, and your thoughts turn toward the seasons themselves. Life inside a castle was not frozen in perpetual winter. The rhythms of warmth and cold rose and fell with the year. Guards adapted constantly, altering how they slept, what they wore, and even how they ate, depending on the calendar. It is well established that in winter, survival dominated every thought. Extra layers of wool, cloaks doubled up, braziers hauled into chambers, and bedding stuffed thick with straw. All were essential just to stave off frostbite. Men slept in communal heaps, dogs pressed at their sides, food heavy with fat to keep the body's furnace burning. But when summer came, the pattern shifted completely. Guards shed their layers, sleeping sometimes in nothing but a linen tunic. Cloaks were cast aside. Brazier fires were, of course, unnecessary. Imagine lying in the same guard room where frost once formed on the walls, but now you are restless from the stifling heat trapped in the stone. You kick at your straw bedding, too warm even for comfort, and long for the sharp bite of winter air. An unexpected detail emerges from the records. In summer, guards often drag their bedding outside, onto the battlements or into the courtyards, choosing the cool night breezes over the stuffy, airless chambers. Picture rows of soldiers stretched out along a parapet, their cloaks spread beneath them, the stars wheeling overhead. The stone beneath was still hard, but the open air gave relief. Of course, it carried its own risks. A sudden rain shower, heavy dew, or the surprise of an enemy arrow. But many preferred it to suffocating indoors. Scholars remain divided about whether summer or winter was actually harder for the guards. Some argue that winter's bitter cold was the greater danger, draining strength and threatening life. Others point to summer fatigue, when the short nights meant fewer hours of rest, and swarms of insects kept men tossing and turning on their pallets. Both extremes gnawed at a man's health in different ways. Rations shifted with the seasons as well. Winter was for heavy, salted meats and grains. Summer brought fresh vegetables and fruits from the castle gardens. The rituals of bedding changed too. In winter, straw was piled thick to insulate against the stone. In summer, bedding was thinned deliberately, sometimes replaced entirely with woven mats of reeds or rushes, which breathed better in the heat. Tonight, though, you feel winter still. Your cloak is tight, the dog is pressed against your side, the brazier's glow is fading. Yet you know that months from now, the same chamber will be stifling, and you will yearn for the very cold that now feels so merciless. That rhythm, harsh and unrelenting, is the heartbeat of guard life in a medieval castle. The rhythm of the seasons lingers, but now your mind drifts outward, beyond the castle walls, toward the lives of peasants huddled in their huts. Comparing their nights with the frozen vigils of the guards shows you just how different, and yet how similar, survival could be. The contrast is striking. The peasant's cottage was humble but warm. The fortress was grand but cold. Guards, shivering in their stone towers, often envied the peasants' smoky little homes, where heat clung to mud walls more faithfully than it ever did to thick stone. It is a firmly observed truth that medieval peasants slept close to their hearths. Their houses were often single-room structures with a central fire pit, the smoke escaping through a simple hole in the roof. Unlike castles whose tall walls and vast chambers trapped damp cold, these small cottages held their warmth more efficiently, even if the air grew smoky and acrid. Families slept together in heaps of blankets, furs, and straw, with the animals, a piglet, a goat, often brought inside to add their own body warmth. For all their poverty, peasants rarely endured the kind of bone-deep, penetrating chill that haunted the castle guard rooms. Specialists remain divided on which life was truly harsher. Some argue peasants endured constant smoke inhalation, damp floors, and lice, making their lives no warmer in the long run. Others counter that the sheer scale of the castles, with their soaring ceilings and drafty corridors, left guards at a greater risk of frostbite. Picture the sensory difference. In a hut, you hear the constant crackle of a central fire, the cough of family members, the shuffling of animals. The air is thick, heavy with smoke and the smell of dung, but it is warm, clinging to your skin like a blanket. In the castle, you hear the whistle of wind through arrow slits, the faint hiss of frost. The air is clearer, but it cuts through you, stealing warmth with every breath. This comparison weighed on the guards. Some men, raised in villages, muttered that they preferred their mother's smoky cottages to the grand towers of their lords. You settle back on your pallet, considering both worlds. The hut, smoky but warm. The castle, clean but cold. You tug your cloak tighter, perhaps wishing for the snug chaos of a cottage fire, but resigned to the icy grandeur of stone. And slowly, lulled by exhaustion, you drift into uneasy slumber once again. The thought of smoky cottages fades, and your mind turns to another influence on castle life, the routine shaped by monasteries. In the Middle Ages, castles and cloisters often stood side by side, and the discipline of monks left its mark on garrisons as well. Guards and monks lived in worlds divided by walls and duty. Yet their nights were not so different. Both rose at odd hours. Both endured cold stone dormitories. Both relied on strict schedules to carry them through the long dark. One firmly established observation is that monastic houses set the rhythm of bells across medieval Europe. The canonical hours, matins at midnight, lauds at dawn, were marked by chimes that echoed beyond the cloisters into the castles nearby. Guards heard those bells, just as monks shuffled into chill chapels to chant in the dark. Soldiers shifted on their straw pallets, half awake, reminded that time never truly belonged to them, but to the order of the bell. Picture the sensory world of a monastic dormitory. Dozens of men in wool habits lie side by side on simple pallets. No fires are permitted for fear of indulgence. The air is sharp, breath visible in the dark. The silence is broken only by coughs and the rustle of cloth. Guards in castles experienced nearly the same. Rows of men on straw, cloaks pulled tight. Forbidden fires risking punishment. Silence, heavy, except for the groan of wind. The rhythm of waking at intervals was another similarity. Just as monks rose for midnight prayers, guards woke for their rotating shifts. In both cases, sleep was fractured, never whole, always broken by duty. The result was the same. Men stumbling through dark halls, eyes heavy, minds dulled, bodies aching from the cold. Now close your eyes and imagine lying in your castle guard room. The bells toll faintly from a monastery beyond the walls. The sound drifts through the night, low and haunting, reminding you that others too are awake. Others too shiver in stone halls. You pull your cloak tighter, whisper a prayer you learned as a boy, and let the rhythm carry you. The line between soldier and monk blurs in the dark. Both live by discipline. Both sleep uneasily. Both chase warmth in worlds of stone. The echo of monastery bells fades. Yet another sound creeps into the guard room, one less physical, more unsettling. As the wind moans and the brazier dies to ash, men begin whispering stories. In the medieval mind, The cold was not merely weather, it was alive, a force inhabited by spirits, demons, or the restless dead. You've heard comrades mutter about frost demons sneaking through cracks, or about the souls of the drowned drifting on the winter winds. Superstition was a quilt, just as real as straw or fur, covering men with both comfort and fear. A well-recorded belief across Europe was that cold nights drew spirits closer. Guards, bound to their posts, had no refuge. To them, every icy gust could carry more than just a chill. It could be the breath of something watching. Something rather odd survives in folklore. Some soldiers swore that if frost formed on your eyelashes while you slept, it meant a ghost had brushed your face. Others said a man who woke with frozen hands had been grasped by the dead. Imagine waking in a stone tower, your fingers stiff, and your comrade staring at you wide-eyed, muttering that a spirit had touched you in the night. Whether you laughed or shivered, the superstition sank deep. Picture the guard room, steeped in such stories. Men huddle close, cloaks drawn tight, telling one another of strange sounds in the corridors, of pale figures glimpsed on the battlements. The brazier sputters, sparks flaring as though agreeing with every tale. A draft slithers through the arrow slit, and everyone stiffens, eyes darting. The sensory impressions are vivid. You lie under your cloak, ears pricked to every creak of stone, every whistle of wind. Your heart quickens when the dog at your side growls low, staring into the shadows. You know it is probably nothing, yet your fingers clench in your mittens and you mutter a charm you barely remember from childhood. The night feels thicker, heavier, as though invisible eyes are peering through the walls. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself caught between fear and comfort. The chamber is dim, the fire nearly out. A comrade whispers of ghosts. The dog at your side shifts uneasily. You breathe slowly, convincing yourself it is only the wind, only the cold. Yet you whisper a prayer anyway, because the night feels long, and the frost sometimes seems too cruel to be mere weather. The superstition is alive around you, a blanket woven of fear and hope. The whisper of ghost stories lingers. But not every explanation for the dangers of cold came from superstition. Medieval minds also leaned on the wisdom of physicians, healers, and medical texts. The cold was not only spiritual, it was humoral. Doctors of the age spoke in the language of balance, of hot and cold, wet and dry. One well-documented observation is that medieval medical theory insisted cold air was harmful to the lungs and brain. Texts warned that inhaling the night air chilled the humors and invited melancholy. To counteract this, physicians advised wrapping the head tightly at night and covering the chest with wool. Guards, hearing this advice, pulled their hoods close around their faces and wrapped their cloaks high, a practice that was practical whether they believed the science or not. Something rather curious appears in surviving household manuals. Some recommended rubbing fat or oil on the skin before sleep. Goose fat, lard, even fish oil was smeared on feet and hands, believed to seal in the warmth. Imagine a guard anointing his toes with grease before pulling on his socks. The smell would be pungent, but the effect surprisingly insulating. Picture the sensory world of these remedies. A guard rubs oil into his hands, the slick sheen catching the faint firelight. Another sips a cup of hot wine steeped with cinnamon, its aroma rich and foreign. A third chews on garlic cloves, muttering that physicians praised it as a warming food. The chamber fills with odd, mingling scents: smoke, sweat, grease, spice, and pungent herbs. Medical advice also overlapped with diet. Doctors urged men to eat hot foods, onions, mustard, pepper, before bed to stoke the inner fire. A guard room after such a meal smelled fiercely of onion and pepper, enough to sting the eyes. But the men laughed through watering eyes, convinced they would sleep warmer for it. Close your eyes now and picture the chamber, layered with these remedies. Guards rubbing grease on their feet, others chewing garlic. The smells are overwhelming. The practice is odd, but the intention is the same: to guard against the cold. In their own way, these rituals gave men a sense of control. As you curl beneath your cloak, you think of all the advice. Cover your head, eat onions, rub fat, sip warm drink. You chuckle softly, but you follow it anyway, because in the end, anything that promises warmth is worth trying. The memory of strange remedies clings to you. The smell of garlic, the slick feel of grease on skin. But as you nestle deeper into the straw, another thought rises. Not every guard endured the night equally. Social rank shaped warmth as much as wool or fire. A noble's personal bodyguard might fall asleep in relative comfort, while a common sentry froze in the same chamber only a few feet away. The cold, like so many things in the Middle Ages, was unevenly distributed. It is firmly established in household accounts that lords often provided better bedding and clothing to their personal retainers. These royal or noble guards sometimes slept on raised wooden frames, on mattresses stuffed with down or feathers, and under blankets lined with fur. Their cloaks were trimmed with fox or sable, their hose better woven. Such luxuries didn't make them immune to the cold, but they softened its bite. Meanwhile, ordinary watchmen made do with flattened straw sacks and cloaks already patched and threadbare. Something rather unexpected surfaces in a few chronicles. Nobles occasionally gifted their guards cast-off garments, not from pity, but from practicality. A cloak that had grown too shabby for a lord could still save the life of a soldier. Imagine a retainer wrapping himself in a velvet cloak, once bright but now faded, its warmth unchanged despite its frayed hem. The soldier would boast about the garment, not because it was pretty, but because it was warmer than anything he had owned before. Picture the sensory difference. At one end of the chamber, a noble's guard pulls a heavy fur over himself, the pelt thick and soft, smelling faintly of musk. He stretches on a raised bed, the mattress yielding beneath him. Across the same room, a common watchman lies on bare straw, his cloak threadbare, his socks patched with scraps. His toes curl, aching with cold, while the noble's guard sighs into relative warmth. The contrast is not hidden. It is in every glance across the chamber, every rustle of finer cloth. And yet, even with this disparity, cold was a great leveler when desperation rose high enough. In times of siege or bitter winter, lines blurred. Even the king's men found themselves shoulder to shoulder with ordinary soldiers, sharing whatever warmth they could. Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself as both men. First, the favored guard, wrapped in fur, the straw mattress lifted above the chill floor, dreaming easily. Then, the common sentry, pulling a thin cloak tight, straw poking through the fabric, his dreams fractured by his chattering teeth. Both lie in the same room, yet their nights are worlds apart. Privilege softens the night, but it never banishes it entirely. In a medieval castle, even the best-placed guard still woke with his breath steaming in the air, reminded that the stone cared nothing for rank. The contrast between rich and poor guards lingers, but soon your mind drifts to those who were not permanent members of the garrison at all. The travelers, merchants, messengers, and wandering pilgrims who sometimes found themselves inside the castle walls after nightfall. Unlike the seasoned sentries who knew every trick against the frost, these temporary guests had to improvise. It is well documented that castles acted as way stations. Royal messengers, merchants, or noble allies might be offered a night's shelter. They were rarely placed in noble chambers unless their rank demanded it. More often, they were lodged in outbuildings, guest halls, or even in the same drafty guard rooms as the garrison. Warmth was not guaranteed. Something rather curious emerges from travelers' accounts. Many brought their own bedding. A merchant might unroll a thick wool blanket carried in his pack. A pilgrim might spread a cloak stiff with road dust. They learned quickly not to rely on castle hospitality for comfort. He would soon learn the true chill of stone walls. Scholars remain divided about how generous castles were with their guests. Some argue that hospitality was a sacred duty, and even lowly travelers received straw, blankets, and access to the fire. Others maintain that garrisons guarded their supplies jealously, offering little more than floor space. Picture the sensory world of such improvisation. A traveler spreads his cloak in a corner, brushing aside musty straw left behind by others. He pulls a bag under his head as a pillow, its leather creaking. Around him, guards shift on their own pallets, some eyeing him with curiosity, others ignoring him entirely. The air smells of smoke, damp wool, and unfamiliar bodies. He shivers, unused to the unrelenting chill of the castle stone, and curls tighter beneath his thin covering. Some guests sought warmth by drawing close to the guards' fires. There are tales of messengers slipping coins to soldiers in exchange for a place near the brazier. The brazier glows red. The guards mutter about fairness, but the coin jingles in someone's purse, and the traveler sleeps easier. Close your eyes now and imagine yourself as one of these travelers. You have ridden all day through a cold rain. Your cloak is damp. Your bones are aching. You enter the guard room with relief, only to find the air inside is colder than the stable you left behind. The guards wave you toward a corner, where you spread your straw hastily and wrap yourself in your cloak. You hear their laughter, their muttered stories, their snores as they drift off. You lie awake longer, teeth chattering, wondering if morning will ever come. For the seasoned guard beside you, the night is routine. For you, the traveler, it is a lesson in humility. A reminder that castles, though strong, were not built for comfort. The image of shivering travelers fades, and your thoughts shift toward the families who sometimes lived within the castle walls. Not every guard was a solitary figure. Many brought wives and children with them, especially in long-term garrisons where service stretched over years. These women and children shared the same drafty chambers, the same icy stone, the same tricks of survival. A castle at night was not only a fortress, it was also a strange, half-hidden home. It is a well-attested fact that in peacetime, garrisons often included households. Records of provisioning list not only bread and ale for soldiers, but also extra grain, cloth, and firewood for their dependents. Wives acted as laundresses, cooks, or nurses. Children fetched water or ran errands. At night, all of them faced the same cold as the men on watch, curling together in corners of towers or tucked into lofts above storerooms. Something rather touching emerges from the accounts. Children often slept directly beside their fathers in the guard chambers, burrowed under the same cloaks. A weary sentry returning from a shift, his boots still wet, lying down on the straw with his small son pressed against him, both wrapped in one woolen blanket. The boy, already asleep, breathes evenly. The father, bone-tired, smiles faintly, despite the cold. That closeness turned bleak rooms into places of fragile warmth. Picture the sensory details of such a guard-room family. A mother sits near a brazier, mending socks by the dim firelight, the smell of singed wool drifting in the air. Children tumble onto straw piles, giggling until a stern look hushes them. A guard, exhausted, dozes in a corner while his wife pulls a cloak over him. The room is thick with sounds, muffled laughter, the hiss of wind. The smell is layered, smoke, sweat, milk from a goat tethered nearby, and the earthy tang of straw. One odd tidbit from a French castle roll mentions children being issued half rations of ale, watered and weak, to help them sleep in the cold. Imagine a drowsy child sipping thin ale before curling against her mother's side, warmth rising in her cheeks, her eyelids drooping as the wind howls beyond the walls. The presence of families changed the psychology of the guards as well. A soldier lying down beside his wife and children felt a different responsibility to keep them alive, as well as himself. He could endure misery alone, but watching a child shiver made the cold more cruel. Now, close your eyes and picture such a night. You are not alone in the guard room, but surrounded by the quiet chorus of a family's breathing. A child stirs in sleep, murmuring softly. A woman tucks a blanket tighter around her husband. The chamber is still cold, the draft still slipping in. Yet the presence of family reshapes it. The stone no longer feels like a prison, but a fragile shelter, where warmth is measured not only in degrees, but in closeness. The gentle sighs of children fade into memory, and now your thoughts turn to the nights when comfort was stripped away entirely, when the castle was under siege. In such times, warmth became even rarer, food scarcer, and sleep more fragile. A guard on duty during a blockade faced not only cold stone and biting wind, but also gnawing hunger, frayed nerves, and the ever-present fear of an enemy assault. It is a well-recorded fact that sieges could last for weeks, months, even years. Chronicles tell of castles where supplies dwindled so low that men burned furniture for fuel and ate rats to stave off starvation. In such conditions, warmth was nearly impossible to maintain. Fires were rationed, the smoke kept low so as not to reveal positions. Guards might find themselves sleeping without a brazier at all, their breath hanging white in the air. The cold pressed heavier when bellies were empty, for hunger stripped the body's fire as surely as the wind stripped the skin. Something rather unexpected appears in siege accounts. Men sometimes slept in their armor. It was not only readiness for attack that demanded it, it was also the peculiar comfort of steel. Though heavy and stiff, armor, when worn with its padding, trapped body heat surprisingly well. Imagine a soldier collapsing after a long watch, his helm set aside, but his mail shirt and padded gambeson still clinging to his body. The weight pressed down, but the heat held in, a desperate compromise between safety and sleep. Picture the sensory scene of a besieged guard room. The fire is out. The air smells of sweat, hunger, and damp straw. A guard lies shivering, his belly empty, his cloak thin. Nearby, another gnaws on a hard crust, the sound sharp in the silence. Outside, the faint thud, thud, thud of enemy picks echoes as sappers dig beneath the walls. Every sound sharpens the cold. Every hunger pang makes the chill feel deeper. The psychological weight was crushing. In times of siege, men no longer trusted warmth to last. Straw rotted. Blankets grew riddled with vermin. Rations shrank to almost nothing. Some guards muttered that the cold itself was another enemy, working alongside hunger to break their resolve. One chilling tidbit comes from a siege in northern France. Guards, too cold and too hungry, tore down doors from storerooms and burned them for warmth, despite knowing it weakened their own defenses. Imagine the crackle of a wooden door in the flames, the momentary relief of heat, and the lingering dread of having destroyed something vital just to live another night. Now, close your eyes and picture yourself in such a night. You are not merely cold, you are hollow with hunger. Your cloak hangs loose on your shoulders. The straw beneath you is damp, the air unrelenting. You curl tightly, arms across your stomach, whispering a prayer that morning will bring relief, though you know the siege may stretch on for weeks. The cold, the hunger, the fear, all fuse together into one enemy. You surrender to exhaustion anyway, because sleep is the only escape left. The bleak memories of siege hunger drift from your thoughts, and you return to quieter nights when castles were not under attack, but when order and discipline still shaped how men slept. Guards were not free to choose their hours or their comforts entirely. They lived by rules, some written in ordinances, others enforced by custom. Even in their most private moments of rest, the rhythm of authority pressed down like another blanket, sometimes stifling, sometimes protective. It is well attested that many castles operated under garrison regulations. A captain of the guard assigned the watches, inspected the fires, and ensured bedding was laid where it belonged. Men were often forbidden to move braziers at will, lest sparks set the straw alight. Sleep, like wakefulness, was subject to command. something rather curious emerges from a handful of surviving rules: the punishments for sleeping out of turn. A sentry who abandoned his watch and curled up in the guard room risked flogging, branding, or worse. Even in communal sleep, suspicion lurked. Guards were expected to wake at the toll of bells, to rise when ordered, to surrender warmth the moment duty called. Imagine drifting into slumber, only to be shaken awake by a captain's boot, the lash waiting if you dared groan too loudly. Picture the sensory world of a disciplined guard room. The fire burns low but steady, carefully tended because regulations forbid it to blaze too high. Men lie in rows, each in his assigned spot. The captain's steps echo as he checks the room. The clink of his sword is a warning not to feign sleep too deeply. Even in rest, men remain aware of the hierarchy. The psychology of discipline mattered. The rules, though resented, created predictability. A guard might grumble about being woken for his shift, but he trusted that someone else would rise when his turn ended. A captain's insistence on neat rows of bedding and orderly fires gave a sense of control against the chaos of the cold. Order was another layer of insulation, thin but meaningful. Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself in such a night. You lie in your assigned place, straw rustling beneath you, cloak drawn tight. The brazier's glow is small but steady, its heat rationed carefully. You hear the captain's boots fade as he leaves the chamber. Around you, comrades shift and sigh, but none dare complain too loudly. The rules hold the night together. You breathe slowly, surrendering to sleep, grateful for the order, even as you resent its iron grip. The image of captains pacing the guard room fades, and your thoughts wander toward the structure itself, the architecture that shaped every draft, every breath of warmth, every shiver in the night. Castles were built for defense first and comfort second. It is a firmly known fact that thick stone walls, often 2 or 3 meters across, were excellent at absorbing and holding damp. In summer, this made castles pleasantly cool, but in winter, it turned every chamber into a refrigerator. Guards lying against the outer walls woke to frost blooming on the stones beside them. Damp seeped into the straw. Boots stiffened overnight. The very material that kept enemies out seemed determined to gnaw the life from those within. Curious solutions appeared. Guards sometimes stuffed rags or moss into the arrow slits to block drafts, though captains scolded them for risking visibility. There's an odd tidbit from Scandinavian castles. Some had sleeping platforms built directly into the thickness of the walls. Men climbed into alcoves, carved like bunks, enclosed on 3 sides by stone. These spaces trapped body heat effectively, though condensation often soaked the bedding. Imagine sliding into one of these stone nooks, straw beneath you, cloak pulled tight. Your own body heat slowly fills the small cavity until it feels almost like a cave. Architecture also dictated sound. Thick walls muffled outside noise, but they amplified the echo of boots, coughs, and snores inside. Sleep was never silent. The psychology of the space mattered too. Vast halls intimidated, their emptiness making the cold seem worse. Small chambers comforted, even if cramped, because body heat clung to the air. Guards often prefer to sleep piled in corners rather than spread evenly, not only for warmth, but to shrink the space around them. Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself within this architecture. You lie against a wall, its damp chill seeping through your cloak. Above, the rafters vanish into darkness. An arrow slit moans with the wind, rattling its wooden shutter. Your straw rustles as you shift, tucking your feet away from a patch of frost. The stone around you is both fortress and foe. It keeps you safe from enemies, but it presses its cold relentlessly into your bones. You sigh, resigning yourself to another night inside walls that protect but never comfort. The cold of the stone walls seeps into your dreams, and when you stir awake again, you find yourself thinking not of walls or braziers, but of people, the comrades with whom you share every bitter night. No man sleeps alone in a garrison, unless he is punished or cursed with solitary duty. Warmth, like laughter, is communal. The guard room is not only a place of straw and cloaks, it is a crucible of bonds, forged in the fire of shared discomfort. It is a firmly attested detail from garrison life that men slept packed closely together. The reason was practical. Body heat multiplies when bodies touch. A row of guards, shoulder to shoulder, generated a warmth no cloak could equal. Some chroniclers describe men lying like sardines in a barrel, pressed so tight that one man's movement woke the next. It was far from elegant, but it kept fingers and toes alive. Something rather endearing appears in anecdotal notes. Guards developed small rituals to make this intimacy bearable. Some muttered jokes before lying down, "Don't steal my warmth, you thief," while others swore loudly to keep boots away from their faces. Imagine a chamber filled with groans, laughter, curses, and eventually the deep sighs of surrender as men arrange themselves in human rows against the cold. There's a curious tidbit from a Burgundian garrison. Soldiers had a custom of singing softly as they settled down. One man would begin, and others would join, until the whole chamber hummed with a low, tuneless chant. They claimed it lulled them to sleep and distracted from the cold. Imagine lying half awake, your body pressed among comrades, as a soft drone of voices rises and fades, like bees in a hive, until slumber finally claims you. Even quarrels softened in this closeness. Men who argued by day often found themselves shoulder to shoulder by night, forced into a truce by the cold. There was a saying among some guards, "Stone makes enemies friends by midnight." The psychology of comradeship cannot be understated. To fall asleep surrounded by fellow guards was to feel protected. You knew that even if you slept too deeply, someone beside you might stir at a noise, shake you awake, or share an extra fold of their cloak. Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself in that room. You lie between two comrades, one snoring, the other muttering in his dreams. Your shoulders touch, your legs press against theirs, warmth pooling where your bodies meet. You wrinkle your nose at the smell, grumble at the snores, but slowly your muscles relax. The draft still creeps through the arrow slits, but the human wall around you shields most of it away. In the end, comradeship was the castle's truest blanket. The memory of comrades pressed shoulder to shoulder still lingers when you stir again, But this time, your thoughts wander upward, to the towers and battlements, where guards often dozed between their rounds. Unlike the relative shelter of a guard room, the open walls exposed men to the rawest elements. Yet sleep sometimes crept in, regardless. It is firmly recorded that guards were expected to remain alert through their shifts on the walls. Chroniclers mention punishments for those caught asleep at their posts, some as harsh as execution, for a single lapse could doom an entire fortress. Yet, human nature is stubborn. In the endless monotony of a winter night, eyes drooped. Men leaned against the merlons, slumped in the corners of turrets, or crouched beside parapets with their cloaks drawn high. These were not long sleeps, but stolen moments, fragile as sparks. Something rather curious shows up in scattered accounts. Guards used the warmth of the stone itself to ease their vigil. Though the walls radiated cold at night, during the day they had absorbed sunlight. In the early evening, a sentry might lean his back against the sun-warmed masonry, enjoying a fleeting pocket of heat as darkness fell. Picture the sensory details of such a vigil. The wind howls over the wall, pulling at your cloak, snapping its hem against your legs. Snow drifts across the parapet, crunching under your boots. You crouch into a corner, knees hugged to your chest, cloak pulled over your head like a tent. Your breath fogs beneath the fabric, warming your face slightly. The stone beneath you is hard, the draft relentless, but exhaustion drags at your eyes. You let them close, just for a moment, knowing it is dangerous, yet unable to resist. The sensory world of a battlement sleep is harsher than any guard room. Your cloak whips in the wind. Icy flakes sting your face. The stone beneath numbs your limbs. You shift constantly, waking half a dozen times to stamp the feeling back into your toes. Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself as that weary sentry. You crouch in the lee of a merlin, cloak wrapped tight. Your eyes droop, your head nodding, until a sharp gust jolts you awake. You listen hard, heartbeat thudding, but hear only the wind. You sigh, close your eyes again, and slip into another brief doze. In the end, battlement sleep was always uneasy, never safe. It was survival, snatched in fragments. The bitter memory of icy battlements clings to you. But now your thoughts drift inward, to the strange dreams that haunted guards when they finally collapsed into restless sleep. Fatigue, hunger, superstition, and the sting of cold all twisted the mind, shaping visions that felt as real as the stones beneath. Sleep in a medieval castle was never deep or easy. It was fractured, filled with images born of hardship. It is a firmly observed truth from chronicles that men often recorded vivid dreams during harsh winters. The lack of steady warmth, combined with broken sleep, left their minds fragile. Some saw feasts laid out in glowing halls, steaming meats and flagons of ale, just beyond their reach. Others dreamt of fire, blazing warmly, only to wake with their fingers numb, their breath misting white. Hunger and cold wrote their own theater in the mind. Something oddly fascinating emerges from folklore. Guards sometimes claim their dreams warned them of danger. One account tells of a sentry who dreamt of shadows scaling the walls. Hours later, raiders were indeed spotted outside. Whether it was coincidence or a mind sharpened by stress, comrades believed him, whispering that the cold itself opened a window to prophecy. Picture the sensory experience of such slumber. You lie curled beneath a cloak, straw pricking through the fabric. Your stomach growls, your toes ache, and at last you drift off. The dream comes swiftly. You stand in a hall of light, warmth flooding your skin, voices laughing around you. You reach for food, for a cup of wine, but the vision flickers. Suddenly, the hall crumbles, the stone turning to frost, the laughter to a howling wind. You wake with a start, body trembling, realizing the dream was nothing more than your mind clutching at comfort. Dreams also reflected the intimacy of the guard room. Men pressed shoulder to shoulder, often dreamt in parallel. One stirred, muttered a fire of food, and another beside him whispered the same vision later. Guards joked that dreams traveled like fleas, leaping from man to man in the dark. Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself sinking into such a dream. The wind howls outside, but in your mind, a golden hearth roars, sparks leaping, the heat soaking into your bones. You stretch your hands toward it, sighing in relief. But then the fire fades, replaced by frost, racing across the floor, climbing the walls, reaching for your skin. You wake, heart pounding, cloak clutched tight. The dream has left its chill behind. For guards, dreams were not mere fantasies. They were extensions of the cold, echoes of hunger, reflections of fear. And sometimes they were the only escape. The strange, flickering dreams of fire and frost dissolve, and now you find yourself at the very edge of the night, where sleep blurs into survival, and survival blurs into memory. In all these routines and rituals, the straw bedding, the furs, the fires, the comradeship, the superstition, you sense the thread that holds it all together. The sheer resilience of men, forced to rest inside stone fortresses that were never meant for comfort. A medieval castle protected its people from arrows and sieges, but it offered no kindness against the relentless cold. Guards had to create that kindness themselves, one night at a time. It is a firmly established truth that castles were marvels of defense, yet poor shelters for warmth. The same features that made them strong, thick stone, high ceilings, arrow slits, made them brutal to sleep in. Something unexpectedly human emerges from all these fragments of evidence, the laughter that accompanied the hardship. Even in the chill of drafty chambers, guards found humor. They teased one another about snoring like pigs, joked about fleas hopping from cloak to cloak, and sang songs as they lay shoulder to shoulder. Cold may have been relentless, but camaraderie turned it from an enemy into an adversary, something they could mock, endure, and eventually outlast. Picture the sensory collage of a final medieval night. Straw rustles under bodies. The air is thick with smoke and sweat. A brazier glows faintly in the corner. Dogs shift and sigh among the men, tails thudding softly. A draft sighs through the arrow slit, tugging at a curtain. The smell is layered, wool, damp stone, garlic from supper, fur, and lanolin. It is not pleasant, but it is alive. Now, close your eyes and imagine yourself at the very end of a night watch. The horn has not yet sounded, but you can sense dawn approaching. The fire has burned to ash, the brazier cold. Your cloak is heavy with damp. Your toes ache. Yet you hear the steady breathing of your comrades, the soft sigh of a dog at your feet. The worst is passing. And then, faint at first, light slips through the narrow slit. Gray, pale, but light nonetheless. You stir, rubbing your eyes, your breath still misting. But the promise of day warms you more than the cloak does. You have endured another night without freezing. And so, the long journey through those frozen chambers comes gently to a close. You have walked beside the guards, felt the stone's damp chill, heard the sigh of the wind. As the narrative slows, let your own breath grow slower too. Inhale gently, as though drawing in the warmth of a brazier. Exhale, as though releasing the long cold of a stone chamber. The guards you imagined are long gone. Their night survived, their watch ended. What remains is the echo of resilience, the reminder that even in the harshest places, people found ways to endure, together. The flicker of fire fades now. The rustle of straw softens. The sound of bells and distant horns drifts away. All that is left is the steady rhythm of your own breath, the comforting weight of your blanket, and the knowledge that dawn always comes. Let yourself sink deeper, as though into a cloak heavy with fur, as though into straw warmed by comrades' bodies. The stone walls of imagination grow faint, dissolving into gentle shadow. You are safe, you are warm, and you are ready to rest. Sleep well, dream softly, and may your night be kinder than those endured by guards in cold towers long ago.